One of the things that I love about Virginia organizing, I tell people who are new to us, is that you won't find a lot that's instant in what we do, but we stay with it. If we decide that something needs to happen, even if it takes us 20 of the 25 years, we will get it done.
We had all met this organizer named Joe Sakos, and we were asked to come meet with others from around the state to be part of thinking about forming a new group or organization in Virginia for social change and tackle social injustice. And I think it was held at the library, and I remember walking into that room and realized I was amongst the most diverse group of people to that point I'd ever met with in my entire life in a single meeting. And just looking at all these people and the diversity, I'm like, wow, this is definitely going to be different. Looking back at it now, all of us have been involved in some way with local issues in Virginia, either affecting us or with various organizations. And it was the first one-to-ones, our backbone of the VO's work, getting to know one another. And we were asked at that meeting to commit to form an organization, an organizing committee, to start on a new model for an organization that would be as diverse as we were sitting at that table. Those that committed that first year, our task was to design something that would work in Virginia, that represented the state of Virginia and its diversity, and to combine our shared issues and resources and power. And in Lynchburg at a Catholic retreat, I call it the birth of Virginia organizing. After traveling together all the ideas, we all came together to figure out what might work. And it was 3 days of work. We started working on a Friday evening. Saturday, we started at 9 a.m., and I remember working till way up into the night, like 11, 12 at night, and then worked until Sunday in the afternoon. So we thought it was apparent that we had to somehow dismantle the barriers between diverse people so that racism and discrimination cannot be used to create policy, nor pit us against one another. The policy of we advocate with, not for, was part of that original organizing model design. And those organizing meetings also produced, I think, one of the most important documents for our organization, our statement of beliefs, not what we were against, but what we were striving for, a vision of what Virginia could be through Virginia organizing.
In 1996, a few of us activists in Lee County in far southwest Virginia, working on a myriad of social justice issues that were plaguing our community at the time. And I remember one evening, we were at the Appalachian African American Cultural Center, and this young man walks in, a man by the name of Joe Sakos, who said, I want to introduce you to a different style of community organizing. But while we were trying to grasp this whole idea and this whole concept, we were thrust quite quickly into a situation where a young Black man from our community had been charged with murdering a white woman here in a place called Strawberry Patch. So what we did right away was to really give some thought to what we could do to ensure that he received a fair trial. So with Joe's leadership, we began by first calling all of the Black people in the community to see if they ever got called for jury duty. Lo and behold, no one had ever been called for duty. We started filing motions in the court challenging the jury selection process. And then we saw from our teachings, we knew that it would be important to get as many people in that courtroom as we possibly could. We were taught, fill the room. People from as far away as Wytheville and Charlottesville came down and helped support us through this whole situation. With that, we found that we were later successful in changing the selection process here in Lee County.
So not only did Virginia Organizing start with helping people understand how to do one-to-ones and how to really identify community leaders, it also began its work in identifying the issue that was first on the list, racism. And we started doing that by holding dismantling racism workshops. We invited the Peace Development Fund to come in and do a couple of workshops, and then we all got trained. There were folks who decided that they wanted to be trained facilitators, and we did that, and we started adjusting their agenda to meet more of the Virginia way. And knowing what would work here in Virginia, we changed some of the sessions and developed some sessions that would work throughout Virginia in different regions. And we didn't start the racism workshops in city of Richmond or city of Charlottesville. We started far southwest Virginia, Smithville, Lee County, out that way, and worked up 81. Traveled 81 quite a bit myself. But one of the unique things about the workshop that we still do is that it was a way to get people mixed race settings, a safe, secure setting where people could have conversations that they normally did not have together. All in all, the workshop led you from a beginning, and it was building blocks all the way through that would get us to how to come together and take action.
So in 1998, I was working at UVA, at law school, and not very happy, and actively looking for work for quite a while, actually. I had been working the corporate world since my 20s when I lived in Maryland, and I moved back to Virginia. And I don't know, I saw this ad one day in a paper for Virginia Organizing. I was like, what? There is no way an organization like this exists. I was like, this ad was written for me. Oh my God, I got teary-eyed because I was like, that's what I want to do. I want something meaningful. And so I applied. And I've been here for 22 and a half years now, and totally grateful for everything we do that means something to somebody out there.
In 1999, we formed an endowment, which is a pretty bold move for a group that was only about 4 years old at the time. But as we say, you know, we're in it for the long haul, and to make that real, we needed to do everything that we could to safeguard a funding stream for coming years. With an endowment, we always have a backup to support our work if for some reason we lose other funding. So we're ready. Also, we paid in full for our office building in Charlottesville, complete with solar panels. So our electric bill now is almost zero. And we also have $1,250,000 from the endowment invested in low-income housing projects. And speaking of electricity, we also helped Montebello Clean Mountain Coalition in their successful campaign to get the Central Virginia Electric Cooperative to refrain from spraying pesticides on a landowner's property.
As we moved into 2000, I was thinking earlier about, you know, that meant we were 5 years old. So we were old enough to not be crawling anymore. We were probably running around and bumping into some things, maybe about to stick our finger in a socket or something we shouldn't. But overall, we had a bunch of energy and we were going places. So the main things we did in 2000 that really speak to me as the first interactions I had of Virginia Organizing were a couple. One is that from the get-go, I was put into a situation with other folks. There were 4 of us total, all students, some in high school, some in college, who were really made to feel the central part of a campaign to add sexual orientation to the non-discrimination policies in Charlottesville. And the thing, especially in reflection, that I thought was really impressive about this is that there were very wise people who had been working on this issue for years and hadn't won. And they came with enough humility, but also wisdom, to really truly bring us as younger folks into the fold, even though we had never done anything like this, and build a campaign that both listened to their experience, but also put ours front and center. And so it was very strategic in that we were and deliberately listening to folks who are directly affected. So we did a campaign where we were collecting letters to the editor, where we had students recording their experiences as they went down the hall in the local high schools. We went on, and I couldn't believe it as in my second year at college, going into meetings with decision makers who had always thought were way above whatever level I was on. But we went into meetings where it was our experiences and our stories that mattered. And we won that campaign. And that was a huge piece early on in my understanding of how Virginia organizing worked.
Hello, everybody. How has it been 25 years since we all got together and got this thing going? And how has it been 20 years since we had our first statewide campaign back in 2001, working with Virginia Housing Development Authority? After those first 5 years of many power analysis exercises, where we got together and talked about just who had power and who was using it in the state, rightly and wrongly, we thought we were ready for our first campaign. And because several of us were working in affordable housing at the time, and because housing is a common denominator for everybody, right? In the winter of 2002, as I recall, we met in Charlottesville. A bunch of us hopped in a car. I think it was a loaner car that Joe had found somewhere. Maybe it was a donated car, and we drove to Richmond. And we were just minutes away from the exit ramp on 64 near the VHDA office. And the car just came to a complete stop on the interstate, just stop, dead stop. So you bum a ride, hitch a ride with somebody who got us to Virginia Housing in time for the hearing. And the car took care of itself. But that was a memorable meeting for many reasons. Virginia Housing Development Authority, they're now known as Virginia Housing. They committed to a bunch of things during this campaign. They committed to open doors to all legally documented individuals. They created a new loan fund, added a Section 8 resident to the Virginia Housing Development Board. And most importantly, they voted to make loans to unrelated people, including gay couples.
In 2002, Virginia Organizing Project at the time was working on restoration of rights. And I had the opportunity to ride down with Ellen Ryan and Jill Carson in the car. I think the only face that I was familiar with was Jill Carson, and she helped me through the process. So we get to the General Assembly. We go to speak to Mark Warner's aide. At the time, Mark Warner was the governor, and I told my story about how it was difficult for me to find a job because I was formerly incarcerated, how difficult it was for me to find housing, how difficult it was for me, period, to survive because of not being able to have a voice. And so the reason for that was to encourage the governor and encourage the legislators to change the process. At that moment, when I went to talk to the governor, it was a 13-page process to get your rights back. And most of the questions was redundant. You had to find 4 people to sign on to say you are a good person. And so we was really excited that the governor was talking about changing the process. I think too that day, one thing that happened was really encouraging to me too. I had the opportunity to do a press conference to talk about the restoration of rights. I'll talk about how important it was. And I think I was so scared. I was shaking in my boots. But one thing that gave me encouragement is when I looked up, I saw Jill Carson, and I was like, I kind of calmed down then. But I think that experience was so valuable for me for the rest of my life because I continue to help people get their rights back.
In 2003, our state tax reform campaign celebrated two victories. One was that $7 million was generated by closing the foreign royalties income loophole. So that generated another $7 million to the state. And in addition, $211 million was saved by stopping the repeal of a state estate tax on estates worth over $1 million. So we did good work. It took a while, but we did good work. In addition, during that year, 41 workshops about state taxes called Who Pays and Who Benefits. We did those workshops all over the state of Virginia. And at our annual meeting, we decided to feature racial profiling. And so at that meeting, we shared stories and asked questions of the superintendent of the state police, whose name was Colonel Gerald Massengill. I distinctly remember the colonel because shortly after that meeting, he resigned.
In 2004, and for 10 years after that, Virginia Organizing hosted a fundraiser in Charlottesville called the Social Justice Bowl. And potters from around Virginia would donate beautifully handcrafted bowls, and restaurants, caterers, good cooks would make delicious soup, and we would have a lovely meal and celebration, honor our volunteers, and it was a really nice community event. And that is just one example of the creative grassroots fundraising that we've been doing for the last 25 years at Virginia Organizing. Fundraising is a political act. And by raising money, we can hire organizers to go into communities all across the state and bring together people who are directly affected by the issues so that they can improve lives in their communities. We've been working hard on that fundraising and do it pretty well.
In 2005, we are now 10 years old. And Virginia Organizing decided that they would include all persons, including persons with disabilities. Virginia Organizing worked with the Resource Independent Center in Charlottesville to do a survey. And the survey was to look at all the schools on their accessibilities. Were they accessible for the students or not? From the survey, the city maintenance department had many improvements that they had to make to the schools. And the city dedicated more than $2 million for long-term capital improvement projects. Eventually, Charlottesville's school system became the first in the state to be totally accessible as far as the ADA was concerned. Years later, we were still working on accessibility, and in 2016, the governor's mansion was finally had an entrance where persons with disabilities could enter through the front door instead of going through the back door.
In 2006, Virginia Organizing hosted its first power analysis weekend. And I remember distinctly, I had spent almost a decade involved in feeding homeless and working poor people in the city of Richmond on the street, and got involved in Richmond Peace Education Center. And that was actually an affiliate program of Virginia Organizing. So from there, I was able to be a liaison to Virginia Organizing and then serve on the state governing board. And that's when I realized that I was actually in a position to have a long-term effect on the state of Virginia and really affect progressive change in the larger state. So that was important to me to be plugged in my local organizations, but also statewide network like Virginia Organizing.
2007 was my first General Assembly session with Virginia Organizing, and we began working immediately on a new issue that we had not worked on previously, and that was predatory lending. In Virginia, predatory lending was generally revolving around payday loans and car title lending, which charged more than 400% interest for individuals. That's an annual rate of interest for individuals, which of course created incredibly difficult financial conditions for the most vulnerable citizens in Virginia who couldn't get loans in other ways from some other institutions. So we joined a new coalition, the Virginia Partnership to Encourage Responsible Lending, otherwise known as Virginia Pearl. And we began working with organizations who were of a like mind like us. And that included the Virginia Poverty Law Center, the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, AARP, and the NAACP. And with these organizations, we worked very hard for several years. It was not an easy task. And we realized early on that we were going to have to participate in a nonpartisan way, working with both Democrats and Republicans if we're going to have any success, because this was not a partisan issue. After several years, I'm pleased to report that we did have the opportunity to help enact legislation to lower interest rates dramatically for predatory lenders and to help tens of thousands of Virginians who gained access to fairer lending practices. I'd also like to point out another issue that was an important issue that we worked on. We helped to establish prenatal care for legal immigrant pregnant women. We began working with the legislature, and again we realized this was not going to happen without bipartisan support, given the current makeup of the legislature at that time. And by the next year's session of the General Assembly, we were successful in helping to enact this optional program for legal immigrant pregnant women for the very first time.
In 2008, I got a summer job that changed my life. I was one of 50 interns hired by Virginia Organizing Project, as it was known then, to knock on doors and register voters. On my first day, my team loaded hundreds of boxes of the 32-page voter guides into a van. And then we watched Harold Foley, the Charlottesville organizer, problem solve on the fly when the van got stuck under a low overpass. And then we attended our first workshop on community organizing. I learned that year, as Virginia Organizing became a battleground state, that Virginia Organizing took the lead to form the Virginia Civic Engagement Table. We brought together dozens of organizations working on nonpartisan voter registration and restoration of voting rights. At that first training, I learned what I had never learned in public school, that Virginia had and still has laws on the books that take away voting rights from anyone convicted of a felony, and that only the governor can restore a person's civil rights. This racist policy disenfranchises hundreds of thousands of Virginians, disproportionately Black Virginians, for life. The staff trained the interns on how to restore a person's civil rights, as well as how to get them involved in efforts to end this type of voter suppression. And this is something we're still fighting for today. We were also given flyers for the legislative districts where we would be working, targeting specific legislators on healthcare, childcare, immigration, and the environment. Carrying voter guides and frozen water bottles, the 50 interns and staff organizers conducted a major door-to-door canvass. Day after day, that summer was really hot, many days of 100+ degree heat. We went door to door all over the state, braving loose dogs and rough roads, and meeting many, many people with stories to tell about what they wanted to see changed in their communities. Not one of the interns quit that whole summer, and we knocked on more than 140,000 doors.
Going into 2009, we knew that the statewide elections that November were going to be really important. So again, that summer we hired 40 interns to do a big door-to-door voter registration, restoration of rights, and get out the vote project. I was assigned to Virginia Beach, and the team there, we knocked on tens of thousands of doors. I asked whoever answered the door what they wanted to see change and invited them to take action on the issues that mattered to them. That was happening all over the state. Statewide, all said and done, we knocked on 155,679 doors from Southwest to Hampton Roads. In addition, later on in the year, we made 47,000 nonpartisan get out the vote phone calls, wrote letters to the editor, helped people get their voting rights restored, and a whole lot more. And it was that same year that we were the lead organization in Virginia for the Healthcare for America Now campaign. We organized healthcare forums, rallies, media conferences with groups all over the state. And through this organizing, people told their healthcare stories, losing coverage because of a pre-existing condition, going bankrupt over healthcare bills, getting really awful insurance for way too much money. And we told these stories not just to each other and not just in our own meetings and communities, but we brought those stories to Richmond, to local district offices, and to Washington, D.C. That year, people came together to demand quality, affordable health care. And that next spring, we won the Affordable Care Act.
All right, in 2010, we dropped the project from our name and became known as Virginia Organizer. Virginia Organizer worked on the Mayfield Civic Association on preventing railway cars from carrying hazardous waste from the parking in a residential area in Fredericksburg, Virginia. That campaign was a lot because we had this low income area and they were just placing hazardous material there for kids to play with, anybody to get over there. That was real big for the people of Fredericksburg to see that there's an organization that's out here that's doing more than just trying to make a headline for themselves. They're actually doing something that's going to improve and better the people, and not something that was obvious to the people too, something that was a real danger to people that they didn't know of. And so Virginia Organizer was able to do something about that. We have bake sales for the budget across the state to send a message that cuts only approach to budget shortfalls is a real irresponsible thing for the state to do. So that was real fun. It's getting out there and connecting with the people. And that's what Virginia Organizing just is mainly about to do. And then we presented both an oversized check and a real check to Governor Bob McDonnell's office for an amount of $921.01.
I read in the newspaper that there would be a meeting in the Danville Public Library and someone from community organizing would lead the meeting. Well, that person was Nick, and there were so many people there. So evidently everybody wanted to know how to upgrade their community. In 2011, students from the University of Massachusetts spent a week in Danville learning about community organizing and canvassing in low-income communities and involving residents in how to set up neighborhood meetings. Virginia Organizing kicked off the Move Our Money campaign in Virginia to call on residents to divest from big banks and instead invest in local banks, savings and loan and credit unions. We made over 96 presentations across the Commonwealth, protecting Social Security to seniors group nursing homes and senior citizens across the Commonwealth and generated over 1,000 letters to Senator Mark Warren.
So in 2012, Virginia Organizing was very appalled at the extremist social issue agenda that was presented at the General Assembly. So we decided that we were going to break up with our legislators on quote unquote Broken Hearts Day, otherwise known as Valentine's Day. And we gave each legislator an empty box of chocolates. And I believe when they opened the box, they had a little note that said, "Disappointed, so are we." At the federal level, things were much different, and Virginia Organizing sent many leaders to the White House that day, and we were invited for special leadership briefings on issues such as the economy, the budget, healthcare, women's issues, and the environment. And locally here in the Shenandoah Valley, the Rockingham County Board of Supervisors decided they were going to let the 287G program. Basically, this program deputized local officers to act as immigration agents, as ICE agents. And people were very afraid to call the police for help. We, through our community organizing meetings, met a lady who was afraid to call 911 when she had a gas leak in her house because she knew of this program between our local police and ICE. And so the Board of Supervisors in 2012 decided they were going to let it expire. And that was a huge victory for the immigrant community because they could feel safer calling the police for help.
Okay, in 2013, we had a discussion on what we were going to do with our congressman in helping us to push on immigration reform. And so we decided that we were going to have this little meeting at Town Center called Light the Way. It was going to be in the evening time. It was going to, we started it on January the 1st, so that we invited Scott Ridgel to come and to meet with us and to talk to us about what immigration reform to protect the undocumented immigrants. So he came about 2 times, and I guess he felt kind of intimidated by us because we also had some of the undocumented immigrants with us, and they were scared, but we reassured them that we were going to make sure that everything was okay. So what we did was we kept inviting every month for 1 hour. We would invite Scott Ridgel to come. So he decided he wasn't going to come anymore. So one of our community organizers had a picture of Scott Ridgel, and we had a chair, and we set the chair out there with his picture on it so that everybody could see this is the person that we wanted to talk to. Since he wasn't going to come in person, we were going to make sure that everybody knew that he was supposed to be there. So that went on, I guess, for about 4 months. And then in April, because we had been chasing him, I think that we were chasing him, and we decided that we were going to go to his office and we were going to have a sit-in or a demonstration there. And he decided that he was going to call the police, and the police had came, but by that time, I think that he went and he did go ahead on and sign the letter to do the immigration reform, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm from Fredericksburg, Virginia, and this just had our first Gay Pride March and Parade. And so that just made me think back to 2014. Virginia Organized was recognized by the Equal Virginia for being an outstanding Virginia for marriage and LGBT equality. Coming into Virginia organizing, it was like really a low point in my life. I really thought that I didn't have a voice, that my time was up. And so I met this young lady who kind of talked to me because I was really interested in criminal justice. So I came in, talked to Addie, we did a one-on-one. And at that time, we started working on Medicaid expansion. That was the start. So we knocked doors, we talked to people, we did one-on-ones. But Virginia organizing did not just work on one issue at a time. So Washington County, they were fighting off hydro tracking in their county. And we were working on several different issues. So one of the issues was immigration. Some of the people came in and told their own stories. And at the end of hearing their stories, I was in tears. And I realized that it was just a thing of civil rights. And so we did lots of trainings and workshops. And one of the trainings we did, we went to DC to talk to the senator there who would not let us into his office. And so we had already had a plan. We had been trained because we were going to get arrested that day. We were going to speak. We were going to have a voice that day. And so I ended up being arrested. And I really have to say it was one of the scariest moments of my life, but still one of the proudest moments of my life. And out of all of this, it made me feel like I had a voice and I could lend a voice to someone else. And it has definitely been the leeway to what I'm doing today.
In 2015, the organizer Teresa Stanley, along with community volunteers and community partners, facilitated the first flood of voices. The flood of voices was an opportunity for people in Hampton Roads to share their flooding experiences, what became very detrimental, especially for people who lived in low-income areas. It affected the everyday way of life, damaged property, and so many other things. They actually came to my church, United Church of Christ in Norfolk, and asked if we would be the host. And I was super excited to volunteer and participate because I was stuck in a flood with students the summer before. So I was very happy to be able to be the first to share my story and encourage the rest of the people at the event to share theirs. Flood Voices became ongoing for the throughout the years following, and it became very impactful with the city making mandates and different structures to help the flooding issues in Norfolk. That was also the year that marked the monumental accomplishment of Ban the Box, which was the renewal of the checkbox on the state employment application forms that asks applicants about their criminal history. So this allowed applicants to get their foot in the door and to secure employment for themselves, which is also a great opportunity. And I'm really excited that I was a part of that.
The Fredericksburg chapter won their local campaign to disrupt the school to prison pipeline and got the superintendent of schools and the sheriff of Spotsylvania County to limit the power of school resource officers to stop the high rate of referrals to the legal system for non-criminal actions. That was a breakthrough win that continues to inspire work in other chapters today. The Stanton Augusta Waynesboro chapter worked with Augusta Health, a hospital frequented by a large population of individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, to be more accessible to the deaf community and their families. We got a commitment to have more on-site interpreters available, improved technology for remote language services, and annual staff training for disability sensitivity and awareness. SAW chapter leaders also presented at a statewide gathering of hospital administrators that year. We wanted to encourage similar changes in other health systems. And working with about 60 other groups, we held a march on the mansion to voice our concerns that Governor Terry McAuliffe was not doing enough for climate change. On a sweltering 93-degree late July day, more than 600 people marched from Browns Island to the governor's mansion in downtown Richmond.
In 2017, the Virginia Department of Education issued a model memorandum of understanding and a program guide for school resource officers that was based on our Fredericksburg chapter. We also held a preliminary on climate change and had 16 leadership skills workshops at our Statesville grassroots gathering. Yay! We held regular trainings and climate change discussions at the meetings of our 15 chapters. We've developed stronger relationships with a variety of groups, including environmental health sciences, health and environmental fundaments network, Generation 180, and Mothers Out Front, and Virginia SUN. I hold a place dear with Portsmouth because I'm a resident of Portsmouth, and I got started with Virginia organizing because of issues that I was having with the school to prison pipeline. And it became real to me when it came to my front door and my child was being suspended from school. I met an organizer that reached out to me because she heard that I was dealing with a high rate of suspension with my child. In Portsmouth, we won the 15-month campaign, and it was a hard campaign because it was a hard 15 months just trying to be heard, trying to get an understanding of what was going on. I was new to this. I didn't know that I had a voice. I didn't know that I can go out and I can fight for a cause, and I wasn't taking no for an answer. We went to many city council meetings. We went to school board meetings. We met with plenty of school board members. We met with members of the community. We met with others, parents that were experiencing school to prison pipeline. And it wasn't easy, but I had a good support system with VO. I met them, they educated me. I learned a lot, and I learned that I had a voice and that I could make a difference, and that I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to make it better for my child. And if not for my child, make it better pave the way for the next children or the next mother that had children that had to deal with these issues that we're dealing with.
In 2018, we did the Medicaid expansion. In February, we held rallies in 9 locations to expand Medicaid expansion to 240,000 people in Virginia. 2, the Virginia General Assembly finally expanded Medicaid. 3, the Virginia organizing work, 8 years of hard work with all Virginian coalitions, which we were a part of. And 4, our leaders demonstrated to their legislators how important healthcare would be to their lives. 5, our rallies and TVs and interviews and newspaper articles and face-to-face meetings with legislators showed urgency of the problem that Medicaid needed for all. After years of work, we won, and we continue to work hard to get people for coverage of Medicaid expansion. And 8, we partnered with state agencies to make sure people who needed coverage are aware of the benefits that are out there for Medicaid expansion. And we worked with the local social service office throughout the state of Virginia to help people, to get into the benefits.
All right, in 2019, our Eastern Shore chapter organized for greater diversity within a local school county. We actually helped increase the number of African-American teachers and teachers of color. That was 4 times higher than it had been 2 years prior to that. Also in 2019, the University of Virginia finally approved the living wage for most workers. This is a campaign and a coalition we've been a part of for 20 years. We also held 112 leadership development workshops and 8 dismantling racism workshops in this year. And personally for me, as a member of the governing board, I believe we faced one of our greatest learning curves. In 2019, after the blackface scandal with our governor, we had a lot of conversations and we learned a lot about each other in the process. And once Governor Northam said that he was not going to resign, we demanded action from him. We wanted to first give a media advisory listing our demands to Governor Warner and to the committees and to the administration at large. And we also went to meet with Governor Northam in June of 2019. The conversation was a bit overwhelming personally. A lot of people have heard that I got an apology from the governor. And basically what I did is used all of the tools that Virginia Organizing has offered me, well, with my own experience, to express that systemic racism has allotted him the opportunity that he doesn't have to resign from his job. And, you know, my son would not have that same opportunity as a Black male.
In 2020, Virginia Organizing, the chapter in Lynchburg, we successfully changed the volunteer policy within our public schools. They were denying parents who had a felony from being able to participate in their children's school field trips or activities. And we thought that it was a bit drastic. So we had a conversation and we were able to successfully come to an agreement to look at the applications, which is the process for volunteering, on a case-by-case basis. Virginia Organizing, in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were forced to shift the way we did our meetings. We also were able to communicate what was going on in the various communities, where there was several things going on that was affected by COVID-19. One of them being the poultry processing plants that exist in two of those locations. But we, Virginia Organizing, we are still in communication with the school boards and the city council and those that we interact with prior to that, and we can attribute that to the internet. So through them, we have been able to continue to communicate with our city council, school boards, and other agencies within our community.